When you die, and you will die like everyone else, you are guided to the underworld by a being that guides the way. One of these beings I call the Death Adder, and I met him when he was a man. You see, the Death Adder had been taking human souls to the underworld for millennia and just couldn't understand them. They lived such short, pointless lives, and most of them didn't even seem to enjoy their time. The Death Adder always knew he could do better, given the chance, so with time he cleaved off a small part of himself and made it mortal. The baby seemed normal enough when he was young, but as a young man, started to say and do strange things from time to time. First, he was able to predict when family members would get hurt days before it would happen. Those close to death would draw near to him and would constantly be referred to as an old soul. This child had no memory of what it was or what its mission was. But as a youth, the boy would see a figure of himself from time to time as the Death Adder, usually off in the distance, but always watching and judging. It was during this time that the Death Adder would start giving visions to the boy, showing the consequences of actions that could be taken and their conclusion. This usually made the boy withdraw, and he would take no action instead, which greatly disappointed the Death Adder. Something changed, though, in his teenage years. Experiencing the loss of a grandmother was the first time the boy entered into the underworld. As the grandmother slipped away, he naturally slipped beyond our realm and guided her to the underworld down a perilous set of descending stairs. While this would leave a lasting impression, the boy still had no idea what or who he was. At the same time, the Death Adder was no longer able to appear to him. The boy became a man, and the man, while polite and courteous, would often avoid people. Due to his strengthening power, if he got too close or had an emotional bond, he could see their entire life at a glance. The Death Adder became very displeased at his protege and began to interfere directly in his life to try and regain contact. And that contact did happen again. One day at an air show, you see a plane happened to fall out of the sky right into a crowd of people. This mass casualty event sent the man directly to the underworld with all the victims so that he thought that he was dead. Waiting for him there was the Death Adder, who finally was able to ask his questions. As he was interrogated about his life choices, the man began to understand who he was and how powerful he could become, as he insulted the Death Adder for cursing him with a mortal life. And the man shifted himself back into the world of the living. From that point, the man would go up to strangers and tell them when they were going to die and walk away laughing when he saw the fear in their eyes. He would make mothers sob, telling them about the deaths of their children. He would steal the people's hope and was never wrong, so everyone started to turn on him. They even locked him away in a cage just so he couldn't interact with anyone. That turned out to be a mistake, since he was able to consolidate his power in confinement. And one day, in a massive burst of all his power, merged the living and the dead worlds on one plane. The spirits of old ran free amongst the living, and the living cowered in fear of the dead. The Death Adder was tasked with fixing his mistake and hunted down the man to destroy him. The two battled for days amongst the living and the dead until they came to a stalemate. In an act of final desperation, the Death Adder tried to rejoin the man into his own being. In doing so, they were both destroyed in a mist of blackness that once again separated the dead from the living.